Hey, what's going on, everybody? Special guest here. It's Jeremy Clark, covers TCU for HornedFrogBlitz.com and the 24/7 Sports Network. Here to talk about new Miami center, James Brockermeyer. We'll get into that. But Jeremy, we met years ago. I want to get into this first. In 2010, it was fun trying to chatting about this New York City event, a Nike event to release new pro combat uniforms. 10 schools were there. TCU was one of them. Miami was one of them. It's great talking to you again. I know we were just chatting a little bit about other things, but what do you remember about that event? For me, it was such a cool event. Something I still, one of those top events that I've been able to cover over the years. I just finished year 22 covering the Hurricanes, which is crazy. So 2010, New York City. What do you remember about that Nike event there?
I remember distinctly getting an email from Nike with like a day's notice. I don't know how you got approached by it, but I emailed them back and said, "Hey, listen, there's no way I can get up there. Flights are going to be crazy expensive. Finding a hotel." And they're like, "No, we've got everything covered." And I was like, "Okay." I told my wife, I'm gone then. I'm going up there." But it was really cool to, just from a TCU perspective, for them to be included in all those schools, Ohio State, Miami, just a bunch of blue blood programs up there that were represented. And the cool part about it was I thought they did a really good job of treating us well. I mean, they picked me up in a Lincoln Town car from LaGuardia. We were basically right in the middle of Times Square, getting shuttled around on the bus to go to the Nike event. Got to talk to Chris Fowler. That was a bucket list item. Got to interview him. Really cool. You and I met, obviously, got to hang out, got to enjoy the media hospitality bar and had some drinks, went out to Times Square. And I think the highlight of my night, man, was, and your fans are going to love this, is you and I in the elevator and Michael Irvin coming over on crutches. And just to know, okay, Chris covers Miami, and here's this Miami legend in the same elevator as us. I don't know if it's safe to say what he told us as he was
Nah.
walking off the elevator, but let's just say he told us not to have too much of a good time. So that was a really fun experience, man.
Yeah, it was great. Yeah, that was my first time in New York. And as you mentioned, late notice. What I remember was I was the only Miami reporter that went up there for it. And it's because Miami had a game. Their season opened that early that weekend. They played Florida A&M, so I wasn't able to go to the game. And I think that's why other reporters are like, "Oh no, it's not that big of a deal." But yeah, Nike took care of us. We went up there. Everything was great, man. It was an awesome experience. And yeah, it was fun kind of linking up with you. Yeah, Times Square, the whole thing. Everyone that's been to New York understands what it's all about. And for those that haven't been yet, definitely recommend it. It was great. And I remember what was funny was that experience with Michael there at the end of the night. So I had a college friend that had just moved to New York and I met up with him and we were only there a couple days, Jeremy. I think it was just that one night, and
Yeah,
we had
one
the
night.
event. So I made the most of it. I remember we had an early morning, whatever our next activity was, but I stayed out all night long and met up after we went out. I hung out with my friend from college and still had a good time. And I come back, it was real late in the night, and there's Michael again, coming in the same time I did, and I just felt like, yeah, okay, if I'm arriving at the end of a night the same time Michael did, it was a good night. It was a lot of fun, and yeah, it was a great event. Those uniforms, I look back on TCU's uniforms. I'm going to show them right here for everybody to see. But yeah, TCU's uniforms, Miami's kind of the unique green helmet, orange jersey, orange pants. It was the only time they only wore them once that season. They played Virginia Tech and lost that game. They never did that jersey combination again. And obviously they've moved on after Nike. They're now with Adidas. So a lot of things have changed. But at that time too, Jeremy, pro combat uniforms, unique uniforms, the kind of the alternate uniforms, those were all still kind of new in college football. When that was coming around, what'd you think of the uniforms and that whole thing with how that was? And again, I just think about how cool that was, and for me, that was the only time I did anything like that. So that was certainly great.
I think the uniforms were really cool. I mean, I think the whole spit blood theme behind it took a while for TC fans to kind of accept that, but I think overall everyone was excited, and that really, I think they wore it against Oregon State that year. They opened up the season, but that kind of catapulted what was to come that season. That's the year they went undefeated, went to the Rose Bowl, and Nike was going to come out with another version of the Pro Combat, which did not receive very high endorsement from fans and maybe even TCU, because in the Rose Bowl, they went back to the purple helmets, the black jerseys, purple pants, and they threw in the little rose into the Horned Frog's mouth to kind of specialize it playing in the Rose Bowl. Something they just felt like at the time that it's such a prestigious bowl game and they didn't want to wear a Pro Combat uniform. It was nothing against Nike. They still have that uniform, that agreement with Nike to this day. But I like the uniforms. I like the silver pants. I really like the helmet. I think I've still got one of those little miniature helmets of the Pro Combat uniform to this day. So I look back at it, and like you said, it was a whirlwind. I flew up on I think it was a Tuesday or Wednesday, and was back home the next day. And I still tell my wife that was like the fastest. I'd been to New York before, so it wasn't new to me. My wife has relatives all up in the Northeast, so we had been before. But it truly proves, man, we're out walking around at Times Square at 12:30 at night, and it's thousands of people still. It's like truly the city that never sleeps. And I want to go back. I would love to do something like that again. I would love for Nike to hold something like that again for another uniform reveal. But man, that was 15 years ago now, 14, 15.
Yeah, 2010.
Long time, man. Both you and I got a few extra grays, and we're still hanging around. It's really cool that you're still covering Miami and I'm still covering TCU.
Yeah, no doubt. And I look what I found. I found this. We got this book that we got.
Oh wow!
It's one of the things that we got from Nike, and I still have the pamphlets and all the kind of the press stuff that we got there. Yeah, it was great. Let's talk about James Brockermeyer. I know that's why everybody's here as we kind of go down memory lane talking about this Nike event. James Brockermeyer, center at TCU for one season after 3 years at Alabama, started there the full season at TCU, reserve at Alabama. Essentially put, we're going to get into kind of break down some different things with the center. But what does James Brockermeyer bring to the offensive line?
I mean, he started all 12 games last year for them. Like I said, he didn't play a ton at Alabama, but I mean, you go to Alabama, you're going to have to wait your time. And he battled at Alabama, didn't get the starting job. When they brought in DeBoer, they brought in the center from Washington with them. So it was going to be a tough haul for James to be able to win that job. But he came into TCU, immediately made an impact. I mean, you bring in a guy like him and you tell him, hey, we have a huge need at center. You're going to have a chance to win that job. And he came in, really excelled in fall camp is where I started to see that he was going to take over that starting center position. And he started all 12 games. He was a really good pass blocker. TCU did not do a really good job of running football this year. In fact, they were one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Now, overall, looking at that starting offensive line for TCU, he was, if the fans go out there and they pay a lot of attention to Pro Football Focus grades on those guys, he was rated as the number one blocker when it came to pass protection, and he was third on the line when it came to run protection. But overall, I mean, he's not your typical 6'5", 310-pound kid. He's 6'3". He's probably about 305, maybe 310 pounds. He's strong. He's smart. I will say that he's a pretty intelligent player. There's a reason why intelligent guys play center. They have to get those other guys lined up. But I think for him, or for TCU, it's a big loss for them just because overall, when you look at the scope of things, now they have to find another guy to come in at center and provide the same type of production he did.
And just looking at those Pro Football Focus, this is the third straight season. Miami's went to the transfer portal, got a center for the third, just for 1 year. Brockermeyer just has 1 year of eligibility remaining. Matt Lee from UCF, and then Zach Carpenter last year from Indiana. And looking at their Pro Football Focus rankings, but coming in to the season, Brockermeyer just fits essentially in the middle of those two. So Lee had that high rating of 82 overall. Carpenter was a 65. And then James right there is 70 overall. And, you touched on the pass protection, where he is as a pass blocker, right close to 80, 67 run there, looking at those PFF numbers. Jeremy, there was one thing I did notice, and maybe you can expand on this a little bit more. I want to get more into this run blocking situation there and the rushing, for TCU last year, 13th in the Big 12 out of the 16 teams. I was looking at the PFF numbers, and one of the areas, or the area that they had the most success in terms of just the most efficiency, yards per carry, was that middle left runs. And so essentially you're running right off the center off that. And I didn't know if you could expand on maybe some of the interior runs, maybe Brockermeyer led to some of that success. Is there something, even though the team didn't run as well as they would have liked, is there some things that make you believe that, Brockermeyer could be a good run blocker, even if, he's been better at pass blocking? Because certainly Miami, with their backs and their philosophy, they want to run the ball.
Middle to left, you had Colton Dury at left guard, which is the guy that's probably going to take over at center next year for TCU. He was a pretty decent run blocker, and in my opinion, he's the best offensive lineman they have. Left tackle, was Bless Harris, the Florida State transfer. He was a better tackle at run blocking than he was pass protecting, in my opinion. I don't know what PFF says, but there were several times where I felt like he was getting run by. But there was a mixture of the run problems, Chris, just based off maybe line scheme. You had at the beginning of the year, you had 4 new offensive linemen that had never played together before. They all came from the transfer portal. You had a running back situation, which Cam Cook started out the year. He hit the transfer portal. He's going to Jacksonville State. So that kind of shows you the level of maybe skills that he had, or what other teams around the nation thought when he hit the portal. Maybe, he wasn't getting calls from other schools. So they kind of struggled at running back as well. So it was a mixture of really not having great offensive line play and a running back room that really didn't attack run lanes really good, bouncing outside when it really didn't have to. It's a culmination of things. But I would say if you look at the bottom half of the season, there was a span for James. I want to say it was Houston and Utah, where he really struggled in pass protection. That Houston game for TCU was just atrocious. That was a game that you could go back and look at TCU's schedule. They were 9-4, and there's 2 games on that schedule that everyone to this day still talks about, and that's UCF. They were up 28-7, and UCF came back and won that game. And then the Houston game. Houston was not a very good football team at the time. They did end up beating Kansas State later in the year, but at the time, Houston, everyone was feeling TCU is just coming off a great win over Kansas. They should go in, they have Houston at home, and they should pretty much dominate. And Houston, they just tore them up defensively. They couldn't get any run game going. Pass block was atrocious. And there was a span between that Houston game and then going up to Utah. Utah was another good defense. But overall, if you look at James' body of work, he was pretty consistent. I would say he was probably the most consistent offensive lineman on the line. Now, everyone that follows me and follows our side, I'm the guy that says, based off what I saw last year, I don't really see an NFL type guy on that offensive line for TCU. Maybe they develop in a couple of years, but I don't know what James is going to bring for Miami. I would say for now, if they're going to be a throwing offense, obviously with Carson Beck now coming off another year successfully throwing the football. Cam Ward put up huge numbers last year for the Hurricanes, so I would assume that Mario is probably going to want to throw the ball a lot still. So in that case, I feel like James is going to be the right fit at center for them.
Let's stay with that word you just used, fit. And I think about this with all transfers. How quickly can they fit in? And I think too, and we saw this with Zach last year, just kind of comparing centers. But he had already transferred one time. James has already transferred, so I wonder if he's transferring to Miami will kind of help with the transition and how he'll fit into Miami's scheme and with the offensive line. I think that'll be big, how he fits in there. But also, as you mentioned with Carson, learning a new quarterback once again. And that's always a big thing of getting to know the quarterback and that quarterback center connection. What do you make of James? Is how he fit in? How long did it take? Anything you could provide some insight there in terms of just his fit?
Well, like I said, he came in over the summer and he didn't get to go through spring camp. He went through all the summer workouts and in fall camp. It was kind of funny. It's like we didn't really see him going with the first team a lot. And I think it was practice 3 or 4 in fall camp that we finally started to see him kind of emerge. I would tell you this, James he's not from Florida. He's from Texas. And when he came to TCU, it was coming back home. I mean, his home was literally 15 minutes from TCU's campus. And he already had a brother on staff there. He had his older brother, Tommy, which was already on the roster there. So just adapting, just knowing people like that, it helped tremendously. I don't know what it's going to be like. I don't know how familiar he is with the roster down there at Miami or how familiar he is with the coaching staff. Do I think he has the right mindset to go in and work hard? Absolutely. He's a hard worker. His dad is Blake Brockermeyer. Played All-American at Texas and played several years in the NFL. He's got that bloodline that gives him that mindset to go in and compete. He's going to put his head down. He's going to go to work. He's going to do everything that the coaches tell him. He's going to study, and that's one thing that impressed me. As I mentioned earlier, TCU had so many new faces on the offensive line. So for them to kind of gel together and pull together, that was a huge feather in the cap for him playing that center position, because it's his responsibility to make sure those guys are all in the same alignment. So I feel like if he can go down there and get that same type of connection with the rest of the offensive line with Miami, I'm not sure how many other guys they've brought in for the offensive line, but if they do bring in some new guys, at least he has some history with working with a group of guys that haven't played together before.
Yeah, it's kind of what they dealt with last year, kind of a mix of returners, some key returners, and then they're going to try to insert some new guys into this line. So, yeah, definitely, Jeremy, this was great catching up. This was great, kind of going down memory lane, as I mentioned, with that Nike trip. But great insight on James. This was great to hear. I know Miami fans are always searching for more information, so definitely appreciate you, man.
You bet, man. Take care.